There's a certain kind of person who walks through life quietly, not because they have nothing to say, but because no one ever truly listened. They've spent years being the strong one, the understanding one, the background presence in everyone else's story. They read the room before speaking, carry unspoken tension like it's their own, and somehow always end up being the healer, yet rarely the one who's healed. Psychologists call it emotional invisibility, when sensitivity and empathy become so natural that the world forgets you need it too. These people don't seek attention, they seek resonance. They crave to be felt rather than seen, understood rather than applauded. But there's a deep psychology behind this, a pattern that shapes how they love, protect, and even hide themselves. Because sometimes being unseen isn't a curse, it's a defense. A survival mechanism built in silence. If you've ever felt invisible in rooms where you gave your all, this video will speak directly to you. Subscribe for more insights about emotional depth, empathy, and transformation. And tell me in the comments, do you ever feel like people only notice your absence, not your presence? They overgive because love once felt conditional. It starts early, that quiet rewiring of the heart. Somewhere in childhood or early relationships, they learned that love wasn't something freely given. It had to be earned. Approval came when they pleased others. Warmth followed obedience. Affection appeared only after self-sacrifice. So they adapted. They learned to become everything for everyone, believing that if they gave enough, stayed kind enough, or carried enough pain for others, maybe, just maybe, they'd finally be seen. These are the people who apologize even when they're the ones hurting, the ones who stay longer than they should, offering patience where they should have built boundaries. They say, it's okay, even when it isn't, not because they don't feel, but because they've been conditioned to think peace depends on their endurance. Their overgiving isn't generosity, it's survival, disguised as kindness. Psychologists call it fawning, the trauma response, where safety is found in pleasing others. For the empathic soul, it becomes a reflex. They scan emotional environments like weather patterns, anticipating needs before they're spoken, absorbing storms before they arrive. But what nobody sees is the silent exhaustion behind the smile, the ache of constantly proving their worth through service. Yet here's the truth they eventually learn. The ones who truly deserve their care don't need convincing. Love that requires performance isn't love, it's a transaction. And healing begins the moment they realize that giving less to others means giving more to themselves. When they stop overextending, they don't become colder, they become clearer. Their energy stops leaking into every wound they didn't cause. Because being seen doesn't come from doing more, it comes from being real. And the moment they love without trying to earn it, they finally step into the kind of peace they've been giving everyone else. They read everyone's energy but neglect their own. For the empathic soul, life often feels like walking into a room full of invisible frequencies. Every sigh, every shift in tone, every unspoken tension. They feel it all. Long before a word is said, they can tell who's angry, who's hurt, who's pretending to be fine. It's not magic, it's sensitivity sharpened into survival. They became emotional translators in a world that rarely speaks honestly. But in the process of constantly decoding others, they forget the most important energy to interpret, their own. Their empathy turns outward like a radar scanning for distress. They notice when someone's mood drops, when someone's laughter hides pain, when someone's "I'm okay" trembles at the edges. They rush to soothe, to fix, to restore harmony, not because they crave control, but because they can't stand the disharmony they feel so vividly. Yet, that same instinct to help becomes the very reason they burn out. They absorb other people's storms while ignoring the quiet whispers inside their own heart. The ones saying, "You're tired, you're hurting too." Psychologists describe this as emotional attunement, the ability to sense and regulate others' emotions, but for empaths, it becomes over-attunement. Their inner balance tilts toward caretaking, leaving no room for self-check-ins. They'll sense someone else's anxiety across the room, but miss the tension tightening in their own chest. They'll comfort a friend through heartbreak while quietly falling apart themselves. It's not selflessness, it's unintentional neglect of the self. True growth begins when they start reversing the flow, when they turn that sensitivity inward, when they start asking, what am I feeling? Instead of, what does everyone else need from me? They realize their empathy is most powerful when it includes themselves, because being deeply connected to others means nothing if you're disconnected from your own soul. So they learn to pause before they rescue, to breathe before they absorb. They begin protecting their energy, not as selfishness, but as sacred maintenance. And for the first time, they see their gift for what it truly is. Not a burden to carry others, but a wisdom to balance the world and themselves at once. They mistake being needed for being valued. It's one of the quietest forms of self-betrayal, when the need to be loved turns into the need to be useful. For many empaths, worth has always been tied to what they can give, fix, or carry. Somewhere along the way, they learned that being indispensable was safer than simply being loved for who they are. So they overextend, overcommit, and overfunction, mistaking dependence for devotion. When people lean on them, they feel wanted. When others need them, they feel seen. But what they don't realize is that being needed and being valued are not the same thing. This pattern often begins with the kind of love that came with conditions. I love you when you help, you're good when you behave, you matter when you're useful. That message becomes a blueprint for adult relationships. They grow into people who give endlessly, believing it will secure their place in someone's heart. They're the first to show up, the last to leave, the ones who listen at 2 a.m., who solve problems no one else wants to face. They become emotional anchors for everyone, and yet no one truly anchors them. But here's the cruel paradox. The more they give, the less they're seen. Their presence becomes expected, their effort invisible. People start taking without asking, assuming the empath will always understand, always forgive. And in that cycle of being needed, they begin to disappear. Their value measured by how much they can endure, not by who they are when they stop giving. The awakening comes slowly, often through exhaustion rather than anger. One day, they realize that the love they've been working so hard to earn would vanish the moment they stopped being convenient. That's when something inside them shifts. They start saying no, softly at first, then with quiet conviction. They stop equating sacrifice with loyalty and realize that healthy love doesn't require depletion. Being valued doesn't come from being essential. It comes from being authentic. And when they stop confusing the two, something beautiful happens. The right people start showing up. The ones who don't need them to fix, to prove, or to save. They just need them to be. And for the first time, that's enough. They stay quiet to avoid being misunderstood. For the deeply empathetic, silence isn't a lack of words, it's a form of protection. They've learned through experience that not everyone listens to understand. Some listen to react, to judge, to twist, or to win. So instead of wasting breath trying to explain the depth of what they feel, they retreat into quiet, a place where they can think, feel, and process without distortion. Their silence isn't indifference, it's the invisible armor they wear after realizing that explaining themselves too often only leads to being misread. It usually starts in childhood, the moment their sensitivity was labeled too much. When they cried, they were told to toughen up. When they spoke truth, they were told to calm down. So they adapted. They learned that peace wasn't found in being heard, but in avoiding conflict. And by the time they reach adulthood, silence becomes second nature, a reflex every time they sense misunderstanding coming. They'll swallow emotions mid-sentence, choosing inner safety over the risk of being misjudged again. What people don't see is how much they want to express. Their minds overflow with insight, empathy, and emotional clarity that could change the tone of any room. But too often, their words have been met with confusion or condescension, so they choose quiet instead. Not out of weakness, but wisdom. Because they know when people are committed to misunderstanding you, no explanation will ever be enough. This quiet, however, becomes both sanctuary and prison. It protects them from pain, but isolates them from connection. They start believing that no one could possibly understand the layers they navigate daily, the depth of their perception, the sensitivity they carry, the way they can feel someone's sadness, even when that person is smiling. So they smile back, pretending to be fine, even when they're screaming on the inside. But healing begins when they realize silence doesn't always have to mean suppression. There's a difference between choosing peace and avoiding truth. When they finally meet someone who listens without judgment, the floodgates open. Their voice, long restrained, returns not with anger, but clarity. They no longer speak to be understood by everyone, just by the ones who truly see them. because the empath's silence isn't emptiness, it's sacred space. And when they do decide to speak, their words carry the power of everything they once held back. They confuse emotional labor with connection. For the empath, connection has always meant effort. They're the ones who listen when others vent, who soothe when others rage, who hold emotional space so large it swallows their own needs whole. Somewhere along the way, they were taught, not through words, but through patterns, that love is proven through fixing, that closeness is maintained through caretaking, so they pour and pour, believing that their effort is intimacy, that emotional labor is love. But what they don't see at first is that they're building relationships on imbalance, one person giving endlessly while the other simply receives. It starts innocently. Someone comes to them broken, and the empath listens, comforts, understands. They think this is connection. This is what love feels like. But soon, it becomes routine. They're always the listener, never the one being heard. The giver, never the one being refilled. The healer, never the one being held. They begin to confuse exhaustion with closeness because the more emotionally drained they feel, the more convinced they are that they've bonded deeply. It's a dangerous illusion, one that keeps them trapped in dynamics where they're valued for their empathy but never truly seen as a person. What they're really seeking is mutuality, a connection where giving and receiving flow naturally, but because they're so used to one-sided emotional work, balance feels unfamiliar, almost uncomfortable. When someone tries to meet them halfway, they might even feel guilty, as if they're taking up too much space. It takes time for them to realize that healthy love doesn't require constant emotional maintenance. It requires presence, not performance. The moment they understand this, everything shifts. They start recognizing who comes to share and who comes to drain. They stop mistaking someone's dependence for depth. They begin to crave connections that feel light, not heavy. Conversations where both hearts breathe, not one gasps for air. And when they finally let go of relationships built on imbalance, they rediscover themselves. Their love becomes purer, not because it's less giving, but because it's freely chosen, not coerced by guilt or habit. That's when they understand. True connection doesn't demand constant emotional labor. It grows naturally between two people who carry the weight together. They feel invisible because they hide their depth too well. Empaths have a strange kind of brilliance. They can see, feel, and understand everything around them with breathtaking clarity, yet remain unseen themselves. It's not because others don't care, it's because empaths rarely let anyone see how deep they truly go. They downplay their intuition, soften their insights, and mask their emotional intelligence behind small smiles and polite nods. To the outside world, they seem calm, balanced, and composed. But beneath that still surface lies an ocean, one they've learned to keep hidden because showing it too often has cost them peace. This invisibility begins early. When they express their depth, their emotions, their awareness, it was often met with discomfort. People told them they were too intense, too sensitive, or reading too much into things. So they started shrinking themselves, dimming their light just enough to fit into the average room. They learned that being understood was rarer than being used, and that silence was safer than vulnerability. The tragedy is that the very thing that makes them extraordinary, their depth, becomes the reason they feel unseen. As adults, they walk through life like emotional translators in a world that speaks only surface-level language. They can decode others with effortless precision, yet no one ever seems to ask what they feel. Their empathy turns inward, becoming a quiet ache, the feeling of carrying too much insight with nowhere to put it. They'll laugh, they'll listen, they'll comfort, but when it's their turn to speak, the words often stay trapped in their chest. Because how do you explain a storm to someone who's only ever felt rain? But something changes when an empath finally realizes that invisibility isn't humility, it's suppression. When they stop hiding their depth to make others comfortable, their world transforms. The wrong people drift away, but the right ones finally appear. Those who crave truth over ease, presence over performance. And for the first time, the empath doesn't feel unseen, they feel understood. Is the moment they stop shrinking to fit shallow spaces, they stop feeling invisible. Their depth isn't too much, it's just been waiting for the right eyes to see it and the right soul to meet it halfway. They learn that silence becomes their shield. There comes a point in every empath's life when silence stops feeling like defeat and starts feeling like freedom. After years of trying to explain their intentions, emotions, and pain to people who were only listening to reply, not to understand, they realize that words have limits. Silence, on the other hand, speaks volumes. It becomes their shield, a way to guard their peace in a world that feeds on noise. At first, their silence feels heavy. They want to defend themselves, to correct the lies, to make people see who they really are. But with time, they learn that reacting gives power to misunderstanding. The empath begins to see silence as self-respect, a calm refusal to hand over emotional energy to those who haven't earned it. They understand that not every attack deserves a response, not every wound deserves to be explained, and not every misunderstanding deserves repair. Silence becomes their quiet rebellion, graceful but unyielding. In that quiet, something miraculous happens. They begin to hear themselves again. For so long, they've been drowning in other people's emotions, constantly tuning into everyone else's frequencies, forgetting their own. But when they finally stop speaking to be understood, they start listening to understand themselves. Their silence transforms from defense into meditation, from withdrawal into wisdom. It no longer isolates them, it restores them. And the world notices. Those who once took their empathy for granted become uncomfortable. Narcissists lose their grip. Manipulators lose their script. The empath's silence disrupts everything that depended on their reaction. People start to wonder what's changed, but they'll never know, because the most powerful version of an empath doesn't announce boundaries. They enforce them quietly. Silence for the healed empath isn't emptiness, it's mastery. It's the invisible force that protects their mind, guards their peace, and reminds the world that not everything needs to be explained to have meaning. Once they embrace it, they never go back to noise again. They eventually realize that being seen starts from within. At some point, every empath faces a quiet but powerful truth: the world can't fully see you until you do. For years, they've searched for mirrors in other people, hoping someone would reflect back the depth they carry inside. They've tried being softer, louder, smaller, more understanding, anything to be noticed without having to explain. But the more they give, the more invisible they become. That's when the lesson arrives. Being seen isn't about visibility, it's about self-recognition. For the empath, being seen once meant external validation, the feeling of someone finally saying, "I get you." But that validation is fleeting. People move on, change moods, project their own emotions. The empath begins to realize that depending on others to see their worth is like chasing light through fog, always close, but never quite there. Slowly, they start turning inward. They begin to acknowledge their strength, their intuition, their depth, not because someone else approves, but because they finally feel it within themselves. The shift is subtle but life-changing. They stop waiting for others to appreciate what makes them rare. They start honoring it through boundaries, purpose, and peace. The same silence that once made them feel invisible becomes their canvas, a space where they can rebuild identity from truth, not reaction. They no longer need to be understood by everyone because they finally understand themselves. And that's when something extraordinary happens. The world begins to see them differently. The right people notice the light they no longer hide. Their presence feels grounded, magnetic, and unapologetic. They no longer chase being seen. They radiate it. Because for the empath, the real awakening is this: visibility isn't found in noise or attention, it's found in self-acceptance. The moment they recognize their own depth, the universe mirrors it back in ways they never expected. Being seen was never about others, it was always about finally seeing themselves. When an empath finally realizes that being seen starts from within, everything changes. They stop searching for mirrors in other people and start seeing themselves clearly for the first time. They no longer wait for validation, attention, or understanding because they've learned that the right people don't need to be convinced, they simply recognize. Their silence, once mistaken for weakness, becomes peace. Their boundaries, once judged as distance, become self-respect, and their empathy, once drained by others, becomes the quiet fire that rebuilds their spirit. Because true healing doesn't happen when someone else finally sees your worth, it happens when you do. That's the moment you stop begging to be understood and start walking in your own power. If this message resonated with you, subscribe for more deep healing insights about emotional strength, empathy, and transformation. And tell me in the comments, have you ever felt unseen until you finally learned to see yourself?